Millionaire thought he was wedding an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was shocked when she... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, Millionaire thought he was wedding an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was shocked when she... Now, let us return to our main character. The rain poured steadily over downtown Chicago that evening, drumming against the glass walls of the Ward Global Tower. Inside the top floor, under the cold shimmer of crystal lights, Ethan Ward, 34, signed the last page of a legal document with a flick of his pen. To the world, he was the perfect heir, brilliant, disciplined, untouchable. To his family, he was their last bargaining chip. His father's voice cut through the silence. Your grandfather's will is clear. You must marry before your next birthday, or the controlling shares pass to your cousin. Ethan did not even look up. So, this is the price of power, he said flatly. Across the table, the family lawyer nodded. The bride has been arranged. Her name is Clara Nguyen, daughter of your father's late business partner. The ceremony will be private. A faint, bitter smile crossed Ethan's face. I have no interest in charity weddings. His stepmother leaned in, her perfume sharp as her tone. They say the girl was scarred after a car accident, but she is obedient. That is what matters. Quote. He pressed his initials at the bottom of the page. Fine. If an arranged marriage keeps this company out of their hands, then so be it. The lawyer slid the marriage contract toward him. Two signatures now bound two strangers by obligation, not affection. Outside, thunder rolled like a warning. Across town, Clara Nguyen stood inside a small art studio lit by a single lamp. Her fingers trembled over a watercolor portrait of smiling children, the orphans she had been teaching before the bank threatened to close the shelter her mother had built. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A calm voice spoke. Miss Nguyen, this is the Ward family. If you agree to a temporary marriage with Mr. Ethan Ward, your mother's foundation will be fully funded. Clara's eyes lingered on the cracked photograph beside her, her mother's smile, soft and kind. 6 months of pretending, Clara whispered. If that is what it takes to save them, I will do it. 2 weeks later, at a quiet courthouse ceremony, Clara arrived wrapped in a pale ivory scarf that veiled the faint scar on her cheek. The press had been kept away. Only the family lawyer and 2 witnesses stood by. Ethan barely glanced at her when he placed the ring on her finger. This is just business, he murmured. Her voice was calm, steady. I know. I do not expect you to love me. I only ask that you treat me with respect. He looked up for the first time, surprised by the quiet dignity in her tone. Her eyes, half hidden beneath the scarf, met his without fear. For a brief second, something inside him shifted a flicker, gone as quickly as it came. As they stepped out into the gray afternoon, flashes of cameras waited at the gate despite his best efforts to keep the event private. Who is she? Someone shouted. Ethan placed his hand lightly on her back, guiding her toward the car. The world saw a cold millionaire and a timid bride behind silk and shadows. But inside that limousine, silence grew heavy. 2 people bound by paper, each guarding a secret the other could not yet see. And so began the strangest marriage of Ethan Ward's life, one written in ink, built on pride, and fated to challenge everything he thought he knew about love. The morning after the courthouse wedding, the air inside Ward Manor felt colder than the marble floors. Clara stood by the tall window, her hands clasped in front of her, watching the gray sky stretch over the Chicago skyline. Everything about the mansion whispered distance white walls, silver frames, not a trace of warmth. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, entered quietly. Breakfast is served in the main dining room, Mrs. Ward. Clara turned, startled at the title. Please, just Clara. Mrs. Lane gave a polite nod, but her eyes softened. He likes his coffee black, no sugar. Do not let his silence bother you. He is not unkind, just guarded. In the dining hall, the table was long enough for 10 people, yet only 2 sat there. Ethan read the morning financial paper without looking up. The clinking of silverware filled the silence until he finally said, I have arranged for you to attend several public events with me. The press will see us together. After that, you can go back to whatever life you want. Clara's voice was calm. And what life would that be, Mr. Ward? The one I had before your family came knocking? He looked up then, meeting her eyes for the first time since the ceremony. For a moment, her quiet defiance disarmed him. He folded the paper slowly. You will have what you came for. The foundation funds will be transferred this week. Clara gave a faint smile. Thank you. That means more children will sleep with full stomachs tonight. That is what I came for. She excused herself after breakfast and wandered through the endless corridors. Paintings of Ethan's ancestors lined the walls, men in suits, women in pearls, all wearing the same cold expression. She found a small sunroom at the back of the mansion and set up her sketchbook on the table. Her pencil danced across the page, tracing light and shadow, capturing the quiet loneliness of the house. When Ethan passed by later that afternoon, he stopped at the door. She did not notice him at first, absorbed in her drawing. You draw, he said finally. Clara looked up, slightly embarrassed. It helps me think. What are you thinking about? How a house this big can still feel so empty? He did not respond, but something in her words lingered. That night, he sat alone in his study, staring at the old family portrait above the fireplace. Everyone in it looked perfect and miserable. Days turned into weeks. Their arrangement played out like a polite performance. They attended charity dinners, corporate galas, and art auctions where whispers followed them everywhere. That is the wife? Why does he hide her face? Ethan heard every murmur but never corrected them. Clara, however, carried herself with quiet grace. She smiled at waiters, thanked photographers, and never flinched when the flashes hit her scar. At one charity event, a board member's wife approached her with a false smile. "My dear, you are brave to show yourself like this. Truly inspiring." Clara met her gaze and replied gently, "We all show ourselves every day. Some just wear better masks." The woman blushed and retreated. Ethan saw the exchange from across the room. For the first time, pride flickered in his chest. Later that evening, as the car pulled away from the gala, Ethan spoke into the quiet. "You handled that well." Clara looked out the window, city lights gliding across her face. "I am used to people mistaking cruelty for honesty. You could have embarrassed her. I did not need to. She already did that to herself." The driver said nothing as the silence between them deepened, no longer hostile, just heavy with things unspoken. When they reached home, Clara stepped out first, pausing by the fountain in the courtyard. The wind caught her scarf, and for a second it slipped from her shoulder. Ethan saw the faint scar running from her temple to her cheekbone. It was not disfiguring, it was human, a memory carved into skin. She turned, catching him looking. "Do you want to know how it happened?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Only if you want to tell me." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe another time. Good night, Mr. Ward." As she disappeared down the hall, Ethan stood under the soft glow of the garden lights, unable to shake the image of her eyes, tired but unbroken. For the first time, he wondered if the woman he married for convenience might be the only real thing left in his perfectly controlled world. Weeks passed, and the boundaries of their contract began to blur in small, quiet ways. Clara kept to her studio in the East Wing, painting from dawn until dusk. Ethan often worked late in his office, but every evening he found himself pausing outside her door, listening to the faint scratch of her pencil and the soft music she always played. One evening, as a spring storm rolled through the city, lightning flashed against the tall windows. The power flickered and went out. Clara, startled, stepped into the hallway, her candle trembling in her hand. Down the corridor, she saw a dim light and followed it to the study. Ethan sat by the fireplace, the only glow in the vast house. He glanced up. "The generator is slow tonight. You can stay here until it comes back." Clara hesitated at the doorway. "I would not want to interrupt your work." He shook his head. "It is fine. Sit." She sat across from him, the fire painting warm colors on her face. For a long moment, neither spoke. The thunder outside filled the silence. Finally, Ethan broke it. "Why painting? You could have done anything else." Clara smiled faintly. "It is the only thing that lets me tell the truth without using words." "What truth?" "That beauty does not have to apologize for being broken." Ethan looked into the fire, her words unsettling something buried deep inside him. For years, he had lived behind armor, money, control, and reputation. Yet sitting there, listening to her voice, he felt the walls shift just slightly. When the lights returned, she stood, ready to leave. "Thank you for the fire, Mr. Ward." "Ethan," he corrected without thinking. She paused at the door. "Good night, Ethan." After that night, something invisible but undeniable began to change. Ethan started joining her at breakfast. He listened when she spoke. Sometimes, when she was not looking, he would glance at her sketchbook lying open on the table. Pages filled with portraits of the household staff, Mrs. Lane's wrinkled smile, the gardener's weathered hands, even his own face drawn in quick, confident lines. One afternoon he stopped at her easel as she painted in the sunroom. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Clara looked up from the canvas. "Because you never look at anyone the way you look at yourself, like you are both the hero and the villain in your own story." He frowned slightly. "And which one am I?" "That depends on what you do next." Their next public appearance came at a charity auction. This time, Clara insisted on bringing one of her paintings to donate a portrait titled The Unseen Ones. When the auctioneer revealed the artist's name, whispers rippled through the crowd, but instead of shrinking, Clara stepped onto the stage and spoke clearly into the microphone. "This painting is for those who work behind the curtain, who clean, cook, and fix what others overlook. They deserve to be seen." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed, but the usual ridicule was gone. Instead, there was a strange collective respect. When the final bid closed at $50,000, the crowd applauded. Ethan watched her under the stage lights, her scar catching the light like a silver thread. Pride filled his chest, an emotion he had not felt in years. On the drive home, he finally said, "You surprised me tonight." Clara looked out the window. "I just wanted them to see more than what is on the surface." He turned slightly toward her. "They did. So did I." That night, unable to sleep, Ethan walked through the mansion until he reached her art studio. The door was ajar. Inside, Clara had fallen asleep at her desk, her head resting on her arm, the soft light from the lamp touching her face. He stepped closer, careful not to wake her, and looked down at the open sketchbook. The latest drawing was of him smiling, something he rarely did. He reached out to close the book but stopped when he saw a note scrawled beneath the sketch. "People can change if someone finally looks at them long enough." Ethan stood there for a long time, his heart caught between guilt and wonder. For the first time, he realized he wanted the 6 months to last forever. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and quiet. But inside Ward Manor, a different storm had begun, one that neither contract nor reason could contain. The following morning, the air at Ward Manor felt strangely lighter. For the first time since the marriage began, laughter echoed faintly through its halls. Clara was in the garden, her hands covered in paint as she worked on a large canvas beneath the oak trees. The sun caught the streaks of blue and gold she had brushed onto the surface. Ethan stood at the balcony, coffee in hand, quietly watching her. He did not realize Mrs. Lane had stepped beside him until she spoke. "She brings life into this place, does she not?" Ethan glanced at the older woman, surprised. "It has been quiet for years." Mrs. Lane smiled knowingly. "It was quiet because no one truly lived here, sir." Later that day, Ethan joined Clara outside. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing to a smudge of paint on her cheek. Clara laughed softly. "That is part of the art." He hesitated, then reached out, wiping the smudge gently with his thumb. Their eyes met no words, just a silence that carried more meaning than any sentence could. Over the next few weeks, they began sharing small routines. Breakfast turned into conversations. Evenings became walks in the garden. He told her about his mother, who had died young, and how every decision since then had been about control. She shared stories from the shelter, about the children who taught her hope. One night, as spring deepened into early summer, Clara found Ethan sitting alone in the library. Papers were scattered across the table, documents about a merger, his family's empire, everything he was expected to protect. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am," he admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if any of this is worth it." Clara sat down beside him. Power is heavy when it is carried for the wrong reasons. He looked at her, his voice low. "And what do you carry?" She smiled sadly. "Memories, and faith that kindness is never wasted." The next evening, Ethan invited her to attend a family dinner at his father's estate. It was the first time she would face the entire Ward family since the marriage. The dining hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and sharp glances. His stepmother's voice sliced through the conversation. "So, Clara, we have all heard about your little art hobby. How charming." Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Clara smiled politely. "It is more than a hobby, Mrs. Ward. It is my way of seeing the world without filters." His father cleared his throat. "As long as you remember your role in this family." "I do," she replied softly. "To remind it that humanity still exists beneath the glass." After dinner, as they walked through the estate garden, Ethan spoke quietly. "You did not let them rattle you." Clara's tone remained calm. "They do not have to like me. They only have to know I will not disappear." Ethan stopped walking. "You are stronger than any of them think. And you are kinder than you pretend to be," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her then not as an obligation, not as a contract, but as the woman who had changed everything without even trying. The following weekend, they attended a gala for the Carter Foundation. It was another world of glitter, gossip, and cameras. As they entered, the crowd turned. Whispers started again, but this time Ethan took Clara's hand in front of everyone. She froze for a second, startled by the public gesture. When a reporter asked, "Mr. Ward, is it true this was an arranged marriage?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Arranged, yes, but I would not change a single thing about it." The flashbulbs went wild. Clara looked at him, speechless. Later, when they returned home, she finally asked, "Why did you say that?" He shrugged lightly, but his voice was soft. Because for once it felt true. That night, neither of them could sleep. Clara walked to the balcony, feeling the cool wind brush against her hair. Ethan joined her, standing close, but not too close. "I never thanked you," he said quietly, "for reminding me what honesty looks like." She turned toward him. "And I never thanked you for giving me the space to be myself." Their eyes met under the dim city lights. The world seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of the wind between them. Slowly, without words, Ethan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She did not pull away. The night ended without promises, without confessions, only a quiet understanding that something real had begun to grow where pretense used to live. Neither of them knew it yet, but the illusion of a marriage on paper was about to become the most truthful bond either of them had ever known. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the manor, glinting off the marble floors. Ethan and Clara sat together at breakfast, a quiet rhythm forming between them that neither wanted to break. For the first time, the silence felt comfortable. Mrs. Lane served the coffee and smiled knowingly. "It is nice to see laughter at this table again," she said softly, before leaving the room. Ethan glanced at Clara. "You have won over everyone in this house." She looked up from her cup, smiling faintly. "Not everyone, Mr. Ward?" He paused. "Ethan," he corrected gently. Her smile deepened. "All right then, Ethan." That afternoon, Clara prepared for another public event, a board meeting and charity announcement. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant but modest. As she stood before the mirror, she caught Ethan's reflection behind her. "You look beautiful," he said, almost as if the words surprised him. Clara turned, her voice steady but kind. "You do not have to say that." "I know," he replied quietly, "but I wanted to." Later that day, at the Ward Global headquarters, the conference hall buzzed with reporters and investors. Ethan stood beside Clara as the new art scholarship program was announced. Cameras flashed, capturing their poised smiles. But when the press conference ended, one reporter called out a sharp question. "Mr. Ward, is it true your wife used her marriage to climb the social ladder? Some say her tragic backstory is fabricated." The crowd murmured. Clara froze, her breath catching. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke firmly. "My wife does not need to climb anything. She already stands taller than most people I know." The room fell silent. Clara turned toward him, her eyes shining with quiet gratitude. When they returned home, she stepped out of the car and exhaled shakily. "You did not have to defend me like that." "Yes, I did," he said simply, "because I should have done it from the beginning." In the days that followed, the distance between them disappeared completely. Ethan began working from home more often, sharing meals, walks, and long talks late into the night. They spoke about everything: fear, regret, dreams, and in those conversations, their walls began to crumble. One evening, rain pattered softly against the windows as Clara painted in her studio. Ethan entered quietly, watching her from behind. "Do you ever regret saying yes?" he asked. She did not look up. "No, do you?" He took a slow breath. "Not anymore." When she finally turned, her eyes met his. The sound of the rain filled the silence. Without thinking, Ethan stepped closer. "Clara," he said softly, "I used to think this marriage was a cage. Now it feels like the only thing that set me free." She hesitated, her heart racing. "Then maybe we both were wrong in the best possible way." He reached out, brushing his thumb against her scar. She did not pull away this time. Her voice trembled slightly as she whispered, "You see it now, do you not? It is not a flaw. It is proof I survived." Ethan's reply was barely audible. "It is beautiful." For the first time, he kissed her not out of duty or expectation, but because he finally understood what he had been missing all along. The storm outside deepened, thunder echoing softly in the distance, but inside the room, everything was still. That night, neither of them spoke again. They simply stayed close, knowing that the line between their contract and their hearts had vanished completely. The 6 months were almost over, but for Ethan and Clara, something far more permanent had just begun. The morning after the storm, Clara woke to the faint sound of piano music drifting through the house. She followed the melody down the hallway and found Ethan in the living room, his fingers gliding over the keys with surprising ease. He stopped when he saw her. "I did not know you could play," she said softly. Ethan smiled a little. "My mother taught me before she passed away. I stopped after that. Last night reminded me what it felt like to breathe again." Clara walked closer. "It was beautiful," she whispered. "You should play more often." He looked at her, his expression gentle. "Maybe I will, if you promise to keep painting." Their connection deepened over the next few days. The contract that had once defined their relationship was now nothing more than paper collecting dust in Ethan's desk drawer. They no longer acted like a couple pretending to be in love. They simply were. But happiness, as always, drew attention. By the end of that week, whispers began circulating through the media. A tabloid headline appeared. "Ward marriage built on lies. Sources claim wife hiding secret past." Ethan dismissed it at first, until his stepmother arrived unannounced, a stack of printed pages in her manicured hand. "She fooled you," she declared, dropping the papers on his desk. "This is a background check. Your wife changed her name after an accident that killed her fiancé. Did she ever mention that?" Ethan stared at the documents, his mind racing. Clara had never spoken about that night, only that the scar was from a car crash. His stepmother's voice sharpened. "You have a duty to this family, Ethan. End it before she destroys your reputation." When Clara returned home that evening, she found him in the study, the papers spread out before him. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her tone calm but trembling. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Were you engaged before me?" Clara hesitated. "Yes, he died in that crash. I survived. I never told you because I did not want pity." Ethan's face hardened. "You lied by omission." "I protected myself," she said firmly. "You, of all people, should understand what that feels like." The argument ended with silence. Clara turned away, tears blurring her vision. "I thought you saw me for who I am. I was wrong." She left before he could answer. That night, the mansion felt emptier than it ever had before. Ethan sat alone, staring at the fire until dawn. The contract, once a barrier, now felt like a ghost haunting him. Meanwhile, Clara checked into a small inn near the old shelter. She returned to teaching art classes for the children, pretending to smile even when her heart felt shattered. Mrs. Lane visited her secretly a few days later. "He is not himself," she said softly. "He misses you, though he will never admit it." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe he just misses the idea of me." But Ethan was not sleeping. Every memory of her laughter, her paintings, her quiet strength echoed in his mind. One night he opened her sketchbook that she had left behind. Between the pages was a drawing of them standing side by side beneath a stormy sky. Underneath it, she had written a single line. "Some storms are meant to wash us clean." Ethan closed the book and made his choice. He knew what he had to do, even if it meant facing the truth he had been too afraid to see before. Because love, he realized, was never about perfection. It was about believing someone's scars could coexist with your own, and still choosing them anyway. 3 days later, Ethan arrived at Ward Global headquarters, but not to work. The rumor had grown beyond control. News outlets replayed Clara's name alongside cruel speculation. Gold digger, widow turned socialite, the woman who trapped a millionaire. Every word made his chest tighten with guilt. He had caused this storm by staying silent. His father called from the conference room, his voice cold and sharp. "You are losing investors, Ethan. End the marriage publicly and save what is left of our reputation." Ethan looked at the board members, then at the family portraits lining the walls. For the first time, he saw how hollow those painted smiles were. "No," he said firmly. "I will not destroy the only person who ever taught me what integrity means." He left the meeting before anyone could stop him. Across town, Clara was preparing an art exhibition for the shelter's fundraiser. Her students had helped her hang the final piece Beyond Faces, a collection of portraits showing people society had chosen to overlook. Each canvas glowed under the soft lights of the gallery. She had not expected Ethan to come, but part of her still hoped. As the crowd gathered, a familiar voice echoed behind her. "You forgot one painting." She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, rain still glistening on his coat. He held a wrapped frame in his hands. "May I?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. He placed the painting on the easel and unveiled it. gasps rippled through the room. It was a portrait of her, the scarf around her neck, the faint scar catching the light, her eyes steady and full of grace. Beneath it, a small inscription read, "The woman who saw everyone but herself." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but raw. "You once said beauty does not have to apologize for being broken. You were right. I was the one who needed fixing." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. The audience had turned to listen. Cameras began flashing, yet Ethan did not seem to care. "I believed lies because I was afraid of what was true, that you are stronger than I will ever be. I failed you, and I will spend every day proving that I will never doubt you again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, their original marriage contract. Slowly, he tore it in half, the sound echoing through the gallery. "The contract is over, but if you will let me, I would like to start something that has no expiration date." The crowd erupted in applause. Clara covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I do not need forgiveness tonight, just a chance to earn it." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You already have." In that moment, something in the air shifted. The tension, the pain, the distance, all of it dissolved. She stepped into his arms, and the applause grew louder, echoing like a storm finally breaking into sunlight. Outside, rain continued to fall over Chicago, washing the streets clean. Inside, among the portraits of resilience and hope, Ethan and Clara stood together not as strangers bound by obligation, but as two people who had chosen each other beyond circumstance, beyond fear, beyond pride. And as the lights dimmed on the gallery floor, the only thing left shining was the reflection of their hands, intertwined proof that even the most broken stories could end with grace. The night of the gallery felt endless, but when dawn came, it brought quiet clarity. News outlets that once criticized Clara now praised her bravery. Headlines read, "Artist wife of Ethan Ward redefines beauty and strength." Every photo from the event showed her standing tall beside him, not as a scandal, but as a symbol of grace. Ethan and Clara returned home long after midnight. The house was still, the city lights stretching beyond the windows. He poured 2 cups of coffee, though neither of them needed it. "You changed everything tonight," he said softly. Clara smiled. "No, Ethan, you did. You chose truth." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Truth was easy once I stopped being afraid to lose you." The following weeks brought change neither of them had expected. Investors who once questioned Ethan's leadership now respected his courage. Ward Global began funding community projects inspired by Clara's exhibition. The first initiative was called the Be Kind Foundation, named after the handwritten phrase she had once added to their contract. On the day of the foundation's launch, the press gathered in front of the company's headquarters. Clara stood beside Ethan as he addressed the crowd. "My wife taught me that leadership is not about power, it is about compassion. This foundation will support artists, children, and anyone who has ever been told they were less than enough." When he stepped aside, Clara took the microphone, her voice calm and clear. "For years, I hid behind a scarf because I thought my scars made me less worthy. But the truth is, scars are not the end of beauty, they are where strength begins. Thank you for helping us build something that will remind others of that truth." The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan's father, watching from the back, lowered his head, pride softening his stern features. Even his stepmother had no words left. That evening, as the sun sank below the skyline, Ethan and Clara walked through the foundation's new children's center. Paintings covered the walls, bright, hopeful, and full of life. Children laughed as they dipped brushes into color. Clara paused before a small easel where one little girl had drawn a figure with a scar on her cheek. "She said it is her hero," the teacher whispered. Clara blinked back tears. Ethan slipped an arm around her shoulders. "That is what real legacy looks like," he said quietly. Later that night, back at Ward Manor, they stood in the garden where she had once painted alone. The roses had bloomed again, vibrant and full. Ethan turned to her, holding a small velvet box. "You once said love should not have terms," he said. "So, this is not a proposal, it is a promise." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring engraved with 2 words, "No expiry." Clara's breath caught. "You kept your word." "I am learning to keep more than that," he replied. She slid the ring onto her finger, her eyes glistening. "Then let us keep choosing each other, one honest day at a time." Ethan smiled, pulling her close. The city lights shimmered behind them, and for the first time, the house that had once been a cage felt like home. As the night breeze carried the faint scent of roses, Ethan whispered, This was never an arranged marriage, Clara. It was a love story waiting to reveal itself. And with that, they stood beneath the quiet stars. Two souls once bound by duty, now free in the simplest, truest kind of love, the kind that does not end when the papers are signed, but begins when the hearts finally do. 6 months later, Ward Manor no longer felt like the echo of an old dynasty. It was filled with light, laughter, and the faint scent of turpentine from Clara's studio. The Be Kind Foundation had opened branches in 3 cities, supporting hundreds of artists and students. Every wall of the manor displayed their paintings bright, honest, and alive. One Saturday morning, Ethan stood in the garden trimming roses, a task he once would have left to the staff. Clara came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee, her hair tied loosely, a smear of blue paint still on her wrist. "You are getting good at that," she teased. He smiled. "You taught me patience. Roses and people are not so different. They both need care, not control." They sat on the bench beneath the oak tree, the same place she had painted months earlier. The world around them was quiet, except for the sound of birds and the soft rush of wind through the leaves. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the torn half of their old marriage contract that he had kept. "I never told you why I saved this," he said. "It reminds me how easily I almost lost you." Clara looked at him tenderly. "Then keep it. Let it remind us that love is not perfect, it is chosen, every day." He nodded, then slipped the paper back into his jacket. "I still think about how it all began. A business deal, a misunderstanding, a lifetime disguised as a contract." Clara smiled softly. "And yet, it brought us here." Later that afternoon, children from the foundation arrived for their weekend art class. The garden came alive with laughter, color, and the clatter of brushes. One boy ran up to Ethan, holding a small drawing. "It is you and Mrs. Ward," he said proudly. "You are smiling." Ethan laughed genuinely. "That is rare, but I like it." Clara knelt beside the boy, her eyes glowing. "You should hang that in the studio. It will remind us that every story can have a happy ending." As the sun dipped below the skyline, golden light spilled across the garden. Ethan took Clara's hand and whispered, "You turned a contract into a promise, and a promise into forever." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "No papers, no terms, just us." The camera of the story would have pulled away then, capturing the 2 of them surrounded by laughter and color, framed by roses in full bloom.